This course is a practical approach for implementing enterprise security architecture. So if you are, I'll see who's this relevant to. This course is relevant to those who want to become an enterprise security architect. You want to establish enterprise security architecture practices in your organization. And also, if you are working in an organization where there is no enterprise architecture principles or processes, but you want to deliver work that can be aligned with the enterprise, then this course will help you to do so. So there's many benefits if you deliver your work toward the enterprise, because you will be aligned with the business, you will be aligned with the requirement of the business and what they require from you. Of course, if you are brought in to do security, the organization most likely is not a security organization. They are financial, they are in other form of business. They want to conduct business, and they brought you in to do security to help them achieve their goals and objectives. So when you deliver your work in alignment with the business objectives, you are valued and you understand what is required from you. It is also for those who want to sign off on work of enterprise security architecture. They can then value, or they can see be able to sign off on such a work. Now, the learning objective of this, and this is quite lengthy, and we might stop and then continue next week, but it is really important, and you can apply the same principle not only for security, but also for the work that you do, IT, technical work, data, networking, and so forth. It's the same principle, but my focus will be on security, of course, but the principle would be the same. So your work has to be aligned with the business goals and objectives. And how to do this, this course will provide you with a practical approach to do it. So understanding business-driven security. So again, this is how you align, or you buy a firewall or buy a solution that is aligned with the business objectives. You need to measure it from a business perspective to have it in the organization to be seen with value to the organization. Otherwise, it's another toy, another tool that you bring in technical people, which I don't understand. That's the CEO perspective. But when you make it linked to a certain business goals and objectives, and explain how these certain technology will help the organization to achieve certain goals and objectives, you have much greater value, and you can have a good alignment with the business. Understand roles and of the enterprise security architect. Understand the cyber security framework, the framework that will help you, that will guide you to build a cybersecurity program in an organization. We would use a framework. There are many frameworks. We will focus on SABSA, and SABSA is short for Sherwood Business-Driven Security Architecture. I'll talk about it in a bit later. Learning how to develop enterprise security framework, develop enterprise security building blocks. The building blocks are those that will make up the framework. They will make up the enterprise security architecture. And you don't build it at once, you build it over time. It's an iteration. Every time you do a project, you build some artifacts, and those artifacts then can be used again later in other projects. Understand how to execute enterprise security architecture, defining attributes and their profile. Attributes in the security arena, we always been taught that there is 3 attributes: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But SABSA says, no, that's not enough. At the moment, SABSA has over 86 different attributes, and these attributes basically are specific, and it will help you achieve those specific objectives to secure them. Like, for instance, reputation. It is also an attribute that you need to make sure that the organization has a proper reputation in the market, and this is an attribute. It's like an availability. It's like confidentiality. So these attributes are many of them: configuration, patched, updated, managed. All these are different attributes that you can be specific when you implement security within the organization. Measurement of security enterprise. So we're talking about learning objectives. This is the structure of the course. I have put the enterprise, introduction to the enterprise of IT architecture, then security architecture, enterprise security frameworks, introducing the frameworks, introducing the business processes, and then talk about contextual, conceptual, logical, and service management. These are layered different levels of architecture that you need to perform. You need to think about the business architecture, the logical, and so forth, and you go all the way down until you are doing management of the solution. So the enterprise in a nutshell is basically a business or an organization with a common goals and budgets in a building or in a public or a private sector. The highest level of organization spans several distance organization units, so it can be different organization units that form one enterprise. It's a human and process and technologies that form this organization or this enterprise. It's governed according to principles and policies. This is just a brief. Security is a state of being free from danger or a threat. This is a definition of security. Now, architecture is a word that is used to describe buildings, and building architecture is the art and science of designing buildings and other physical structure. In IT, we have application architect, we have network architect, data architect, infrastructure, data, and the infrastructure might be cloud or it might be data center. Now, each of these have its own specific focus area. So infrastructure, if we look at the bottom, infrastructure architect focus on the infrastructure. Data, of course, will focus on designing the data. Network architecture, design the network. Software architect, code and functionality in a solution. And then solution architect basically focuses on delivering the development of a computer system solution. The enterprise is more strategic approach to support the enterprise business. It's basically, it bridges the gap between all of the technologies and the business requirement. And the goal of the enterprise architect is protect the system, improve alignment, improve IT and cost effectiveness, building agility, technical agility, long-term planning, vendors, reduce duplication, and improve procurement process. Now, enterprise security is, again, emphasizes not only on technology, it is more solving business problems and identifying business needs, reduce diversity of technology environment, reduce cost of ownership, of course, reduce silos, and understand the interactive nature of risk of the organization. So being holistic and looking after the entire view of security, understand the risk aggregation, how it aggregates in the organization is something small that goes up or something big that can fly down to the, and also agility and alignment with business. Now, security architect is a person who is capable of designing a solution to protect the organization. And the word enterprise security architect or the enterprise security architecture came in a paper introduced by Gartner in 2006. That's the first time it was seen and it was been talked about. And many organizations now are needing an enterprise security architecture, and they hire or they need a resource to perform this work. So either they bring in somebody from outside to help them implement enterprise security architecture, but the problem is they don't understand the real objectives. Immediately, some of them, they think it's a network security, firewalls, it's securing the, configuring or preventing antivirus and so forth. It's not only that, it's much more. It's a link between the business and then being able to allow the business to achieve its goals and objectives and not only protect, but also help the business achieve more. So related functions, also security, governance, and assurance. Why security? Of course, everybody understands why security. Mainly because of the business. Basically, you do security is because of the business. It's not because you enjoy playing with tools or you want to introduce the latest and greatest protection mechanism. You might not need it. Okay, there are many different activities, governing, relating, visioning, aligning, modeling, planning. All of these are different activities that the architect is required to have in order to be able to deliver a solution. There is also other skills. These skills: holistic understanding, understand business language, innovation, leadership, stakeholders, communication, awareness, and so forth. So now you need a framework in order to be able to deliver an enterprise security architecture. You need to have some sort of a guide, some sort of a blue book that will help you on the day-to-day basis to build this giant building, or in our case, the enterprise security architecture. And there are many different models there. The framework basically will help you to vision the mission, strategy, objectives, targets, principle, policies, capabilities, and standards. And there are quite a number of different models that can be used. There are many benefits of using a framework. It manages complexity, making design decision and solving new problems, predictability, flexibility, agility, balance between strategy, tactical, and operation. So this is important because you don't want to do firefighting in security. You need to devote your time into 3 different areas. You do strategy 30% of your time. You focus on strategy. You focus on tactical. Tactical, you build the tools necessary to do the work, and then you do operation. But if you focus more on operation, all you do is firefighting, and you will never get something done properly. And integration of technical and procedures, integrity of design, total cost of ownership, road map for all of the following. This is what the framework will help you do. Now, what are the components of a framework? You can build your own, but mainly there are already some suggested artifacts or component: risk management, metrics, security drivers. Why are we doing security? What are our worries, and what are we want to protect? Business goals. All of these are different bits and pieces that you have already, and you can use them in your frameworks. Now, you can then use a taxonomy that you can put these different bits and pieces to help you do the framework. Again, this course is kind of practical approach. So I will, once I have given you this high-level overview, I will dive down into how really it's possible that this can be achieved and effective and has really good value. I just want to highlight a few different models that they exist, and some of them are free of charge. So this is the business model for information security. It's a good model. It has the process, technology, the people, and it has also organization, design, and strategy as well. That is one of the core components. There are architecting, enabling, support, human, culture, governing, and emergence. Emergence is the things that are done within an organization that no one knows why it's done in this particular way. It's just done like this. Then nobody knows why things are done like this, but it's done like this. So you need to understand those, and you need to make sure to give those some consideration. Another framework which is very popular in the world of OT, operation domain, is the ISA 62443, which will help a plant or a refinery to conduct or introduce cybersecurity within such a organization and IoT, and this will be relevant to the cloud in the near future. Lots of projects going on with 3G and 5G with the cloud and monitoring those refineries. The framework, CSF, Cybersecurity Framework, is NIST. This was introduced in 2013. It was during the Obama administration. It was a directive to the Obama administration to develop a framework where all companies can use to build cybersecurity. And it's very famous now, very popular. It's been used by very high percentage. I cannot recall the exact percentage, but there is many companies now are adopting this framework. This framework consists of 5 functions and 23 categories and 107 subcategories. So the 5 categories are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recovery. These are the 5 main functions. So basically this, it tells you that if you are able to address all these different areas, you would have some sort of a basic security within your organization. And of course, you can use this for the cloud. Now, the categories you can see on your right, 23 categories with the latest update. For instance, identify tells you what you need to identify, and then it references which standard help you achieve this. So for instance, asset management, the first one here in identify, it will have a reference to the ISO 27000, the NIST 800 or the NIST 53, which is basically controls that will help you achieve certain security requirements. So this is a very good framework. It helps organization to build cybersecurity, but it's not an architecture tool that will help you to implement the processes needed for an architecture, but you need it basically once you architect something, you can then make sure that your architecture can reference certain standards. And so the framework basically requires you, if you want to use this framework, you can do the as is, what you already have. So you can see maybe on the right here, these are the reference standards that is referring to, and you can see whether you are you have this or you don't, and then you can create the to-be model. It has also several tiers, 4 different tiers, and these tiers is the implementation tiers. It's not maturity level, it's about how good is the implementation. It's partial, risk-informed, repeatable, and adaptive. But we will be focusing on this. This is the target. This is the ultimate what I want to explain and hopefully bring in some added value to you by introducing this, but I might take just a minute or so just to maybe ask if you have any question, or if you want me to speak a little bit slower, or it's just fine and continue. Okay, so just if I may ask, has anyone worked with SABSA or has been was introduced to SABSA? Okay, so this is the SABSA framework. The SABSA framework is basically will help if you use it as your tool to implement cybersecurity. It will help you to slice the development into different areas: contextual, conceptual, logical, physical. So you will not move into the next layer until you understand the upper layer. And the upper layer starts with contextual. Here is the business. You understand the business, you understand the motivation, you understand the process of the organization, you understand the people, the business, the organization, the structure of the organization, and you understand the business geography, and you understand the time. So this is the contextual layer. So the first layer, it is basically 6 by 6, 36 different boxes. And these boxes will help you to have traceability to the business. So vertically, you are able to, if you look at a specific, let's say, tool that you have introduced in the organization, you have a traceability, a justification to the business. You can link it to a specific business goals and objective. And also, horizontally, you are complete. You have thought thoroughly of every aspect of security. So you have covered the entire spectrum, the holistic approach of security. You looked at everything. So this will help you achieve the traceability and the completeness of the project. Now, this is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is basically to have trusted business operation. And in order to achieve this, you start by first, if you look at the left side, you have the business strategy, the most on the left. You then develop business attributes, risk model, trust model, and then you can then have a security strategy, and then you move on to policies, framework, technical design, and process. These are the different layers, and we'll be talking about them in a bit more. Now, in 2018, they have upgraded the SABSA framework, and this is the new SABSA framework. Now, SABSA Lifecycle has 4 steps. You start with strategy and planning. So this is your first step. You think about strategy and planning. In strategy and planning, you define the contextual, which is basically the business layer, and you do the conceptual as well, which is the architecture aspect, and then you move to the design, and then implementation, and then you manage and measure, and it's a loop. So once you have manage and measure, you feed this to the business, and then the business will tell you whether they want more security, they want less security, they want to relax, or they want to spend more. But they will have the security will be transformed and in the hands of the business people rather than with the technical people if you do it right. So, and you do this through iteration. So you start with an iteration, you start with a strategy and planning, you do a design, you do implementation, and then you go to manage and measure, but then you start a new iteration project, and you would use what you have developed in the previous project to start the strategy and planning of the new project. So it's an iteration. It's every time you execute a project, a security project, you start with strategy and planning, design, implementation, manage and measure, and then once you have completed this, the artifacts that came out of it, they can be used with the next project. And I think this will come clear to you. So strategy and planning, we're talking about contextual and conceptual layer of the SABSA framework. And the strategy and planning, basically, you need to gather information, analyze the business risk, develop business drivers for security, and define security attributes. And I'll be discussing those in a bit more details. And then the define conceptual security architecture is define policy, domain policy framework, analyze domain risk, define control and enablement objectives. So again, you have a guideline to help you go through what is needed in order to have completeness and traceability. Technology completeness, you're not missing anything, you're not putting a big firewall, but you're leaving the door open. But on the other hand, you have traceability to the business. So these are the 2 different stages or different slices of the architecture will help you do this. And to do this, so now the contextual layer, which is the first layer of the SABSA, we start with the business goals and objectives. So you need to understand the business goals and objectives, and it's not a secret. The business goals and objectives from an organization. So you are a contractor, and you're going for a job, and they give you a specific task to do, and then you not necessarily you need to ask them what is your business goals and objectives. You can go to their website. They have their business goals and objectives. It's in their financial statement, in their responsibility or sustainability statement on their website. You can easily get it and extract it. And these objectives written, it's signed off by the board of directors. So when you tell somebody that I am supporting this particular business goal and objective, whether he's a senior manager or she's a marketing director, they will understand it very clearly because it is given to them from the top down. It's coming from the board. So these goals and objectives are very important tools that you take and you build your solution toward them, and you support those particular goals and objectives. So the first thing is you understand the business goal and objectives. You get those business goals and objectives. It could be on their website. It could be verbally communicated, but you need to understand those business goals and objectives. And then you need to look at business risk. Business risk, the business risk, it's they all want to answer the same question. What are we trying to protect? What are the threats that are surrounding our organization? What are the implications of our assets were damaged or lost? What is the value of the organization, and so on. So these are the specific questions that can be asked, and the approach is also similar. Use an appropriate business impact table to assess, to create a common risk language, able to use the risk. So what we are doing here is the motivation. The motivation is basically why the business wants to protect. What is the business is trying to protect? And this is what we need to understand and find and align to it. Now, this is where it comes the likelihood and the impact and the different rating of risks. This is where you need to understand what needs to be done here. Now, you can create different, so let me just remind you again, as I said earlier, these, if you are working as for one organization for multiple projects, so the goals and objectives that you have developed in the first step, these goals and objectives will remain with you, and you can use them again for another project, and you can develop, create an Excel file, and you call it business goals and objectives, and you put for this organization, you list down, sometimes there are 100 goals and objectives, or they could be maybe 10 or 20, and then you say the source where you got it from, and then you keep this as an artifact. This one of the catalogs, one of the architecture building blocks that you will have, and you can use again later on when you want to initiate another project. And then business risk. Business risk here, the motivation why, it's all about the risk assessment and the risk drivers. Why are we doing risk? Why we need to protect? And you can develop different catalogs and different tools. And this is the people who are working with risk assessment. They understand the detail of creating risk register, creating impact assessment, create all of these different tools can be then created here, or the organization might already have them, and then they can be put to work for your architecture. What are you trying to deliver later on within the architecture? You move on and you do business process. You need to understand the core processes of the organization. You need to understand what does a particular process produce, and how you need to look at it from a business perspective, not from a technology perspective. You need to understand the value, And then you can probably follow this model, which is business services, business processes, technology that are used, and then technology processes. And this is very important because your specific process that you are implementing, it has a huge value for the overall business goals and business existence, if you will. And then governance here, we're talking about people. This is the stakeholders. This is very important. You need to understand who are your stakeholders. You know, it could be that a business unit that is this particular solution that you are trying to secure, it's very important to them. It could be the auditors, it could be the CEO, and so forth. So you build up a tool, you build up an artifact, so you call it a catalog of stakeholders catalog, and you keep this catalog with you, and you build it over time, and then you understand that different stakeholders has different domains, and we'll talk about the domains a bit later. These are the different tool artifacts that you need to develop over when you conduct an architecture framework, or you build up a framework for an organization. You do it over time, and you build all those bits and pieces. Now, later on, these can be merged together into Archer, or you can use a different tool, but Archer will not help you out of the box. It will just have certain policies and so forth. But if you already have those different bits and pieces of different different artifacts, different Excel sheets that have the information, they are the building blocks of creating an enterprise security. And then you move on to business geography. You put basically a sheet of list of different locations, their contacts, and you build it over time. And then you look at business time dependency. You look at project that needs to be delivered. You look at you think outside of your task, and you see what the organization is trying to achieve within a possible time frame. So this only the contextual layer. So you have in the contextual layer, it's all about business related. It's all about gathering information. It's all about trying to understand the business, trying to understand the risk that is associated with the business, trying to understand the stakeholders and what their requirement, understand the business processes. And once you have good understanding of this layer, then you will be able to model and develop more solutions that are fit for the organization needs and purpose. So this is a strategy and planning layer. The next layer is the conceptual. The conceptual is more about the architecting the business and preparing the business layer to be technology driven. But before it is technology driven, you still need to create tactical approach. You need to create certain tools to convert those and have those map. But I think maybe we can start this section next week if you wish. And I already been approximately 40 minutes, or maybe we can do the conceptual and then we can move. Can you please let me know what's your thought, the chair of this session?
How long do you need for giving a logical end, Abdalla?
This conceptual, probably we can do it in 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
Abdalla, are you okay with that? Because then after that you can take it probably until 8 you can do, and then we give it to Abdalla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think you're in flow, so let's continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Abdalla.
So great. So basically what we have completed now is the conceptual, the contextual. Sorry, the contextual is the business layer. We understood the business. We now what we need to do in order to start to think as an architect to transform those business requirement into more technical solutions. So now we need to create something called business value and knowledge strategy. We need to, and to do this, we need to create the business drivers for security. And then we need to create the attributes. So this is underneath this box, the business value and knowledge strategy is the artifacts that I'm expecting to have, which is basically an Excel sheet where I have a number. And these numbers are important because they will be mapping between this with the specific business goals and objectives and a specific attribute and maybe a domain, because you need to slice your organizations into different domains, and then you will be able to do the certain mapping. I think, let me just first explain the business attributes. So as I said in the beginning, traditionally we know only availability, integrity, and confidentiality, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Some organizations focus on confidentiality, more integrity, and some availability. Like for instance, in the OT environment, you know, availability is much more important than confidentiality, where in you know, business, probably integrity and confidentiality have more value. But again, SABSA introduces 86 attributes, and you can define your own attributes. Like for instance, when we say available, okay, available, does it mean accessible? You know, we have here a user attribute called accessible. I want to be specific, and I want to provide, because availability is vague. It could be that you tell, a vendor will tell you, oh, it's available, but it's not accessible. So these attributes will help you be more specific on what you need. And you can select, maybe start with 10 or 12 different attributes. You can use them in the beginning, and then you can, so these attributes are divided into different segments, into different areas. Some of them are like on the rightmost, you have the business attributes. So you have something like credible, confident, competent, business enabled, repeatable, cost effective. So these are also needs to be taken into consideration, because you're not going to build, you don't have an endless budget with the, you know, you can also limit this into a specific budget and measure it. So later on, you will learn that these attributes can be engineered to provide some metrics. So how accessible am I? Then you will develop the metrics to show to the business leaders how accessible was this particular solution over the past month or so. So these attributes are very important, and you need to define them, and you need to, but the trick here is these attributes need to come from the business, needs to come from the CEO. In some organizations, in my practical experience, we were unable to speak with the CEO. It's impossible. It was like, that's a joke. Why you need to speak with the CEO? And so we try to elicitate this requirement from different senior managers and directors, look into also other sources of information from, but ultimately, if you need this to work the right way, you need to select those attributes with the business owner, and then understand how, to what degree they want. Reputable, for instance, the company reputation. How much are you willing to pay for your company not to appear on an international media news for consecutive 3 days? So this means that your organization, your enterprise is in the news for continuously for 3 days, And some, they would put millions for this because their price will go dramatically down and the share will go dramatically down. So they could put up to $10 million that I don't want my, I should not be, my reputation should not be, it should always be intact, and so forth. So you need to make sure that you can communicate with the business people in order to be able to understand the requirement. So in this artifact, what we are looking for is the attribute name. So we select an attribute like accessible, and then we define a specific definition for it for this particular organization. What do we mean by accessible? So accessible means the ability to access certain system at any time through different means of communication. So what we have done here, we did business requirement, business drivers for security attribute. Now this process will help you to select the attributes that you need the most. So you understand the business requirement first, then the business driver for security. What are the drivers for security? Is it compliance? Is it regulations? Is it confidentiality of data, continuity of the business? So you create those and develop a business driver for security catalog. Why are we need to do security? What are the aim for, what is the benefit of us doing security? Then you will be able to come up with the attributes. And then risk management strategy and objectives. This is where you will build the risk management strategy, the risk management approach to information security. So you identify identification and classification, identify, classify, label. This is the asset. So this is where you have to have a strategy. Once you have developed your attributes, once you understood your business goals and objectives, and you understood your business security drivers, why we need to do security, then you will build up your strategy. You need to have a basic form of strategy to move on, to continue building the solution and to align the solution that you are building with the strategy that has already been defined based on the business goals and objectives, and then the attributes to measure the effectiveness of achieving the security requirement. And strategy for process and assurance. And this is a defense in-depth strategy. So you need to consider different layer of security. So for instance, we're talking about here information assets that needs to be protected, which is on the right side. And then you build on the asset, the crypto and the application software security, and then the hardware security, physical, and then you move on to policy procedures, training, awareness, policy security, documents, and then finally go to responsibility organizations and policy. So you have previously in the contextual, you understood the business meta process, and then once you have understood it and you developed a strategy, that strategy would include the defense in-depth mechanism. And then security and risk trust framework. This is the entity, the security entity that you need the two different components that need to communicate with each other and the flow between them. So we're talking about within the system itself, the different communication mechanism and how it can be protected. And we can then use the attributes to define the level of security that is needed. This is a very important now, which is the location. And in the location, you need to define the domain. You need to build up a domain structure within your organization and to divide your organization into separate domains. By doing this, you are segmenting your organization, and you can apply a certain policy for one specific domain. So, for example, here we have company A. So we have information, process, people, and buildings. These are different domains that we can apply a policy on them, but also we have a technology then. And within technology, we can have more, for instance, software or applications. Then we can have a policy for all applications. But then inside application, we can have application one, which might have different policy than the super domain. So, so any domain, there will be nested, or there will be different levels of domains. There is a super domain, subdomain, and in the subdomain you can have another subdomain. And then you will be able, once you segment your organization, then you will be able to have a specific policy and trust relationship applied between different domains. But there will be more discussions about the domain framework. This is now a time management framework. So lifetime and dependency. Again, we are diving into more detail of a specific project, but also not only a project, but now we are talking about sessions timing. We're talking about certificate expiry date, and so you need to capture this in this box. And this is from the architecture perspective. Anything that is to do with time, you would capture it here in this section. This basically the contextual and conceptual before you go into the design, and then you start developing the real solution or detailed design of your implementation. So out of this, just a summary, out of this conceptual, we have taken the business goals and objectives, and then we have understood the drivers for security, why we need to do security. Then we use the attributes to be more specific on how we want to perform security. And then we looked at the domains and segmenting the organization into different domains and building policies for different domains. And looking at the different times of the solutions and the sub-processes, and whether it's a corpus that needs authentication and need timing server, or it's a certificate that expires in a year and needs to be renewed, and so forth. So this is in a nutshell. Now, once you move on into more detail, you will be seeing how this can, the full view and full picture. But maybe it's a good chance if you read a little bit about SABSA. There is many links, or many, if you're interested. And I'm sorry if I have taken more time than I was, and I hope this was interesting, informative, and I hope it has some value to you, and I did not waste your time.